You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. And just a few of the messages I want to share with you. Yakubu Ibn Chambers says that it's a truism that every democracy requires an efficient and an uncompromising minority machinery to put the government on its toes. But to leverage on this opportunity to make matters cumbersome for government machinery is just not fair to the citizenry. There are just proposals in the budget that must be approved with the blink of an eye, i.e. the scrapping of the road toll levies. We have a collective duty to hold fast to the wheel of development, majority and minority. That's from Yakubu Ibn Chambers. Okay, I'm sorry, I have to stop it here because already we have spent too much time, and that affects our special edition because too many times we pay attention to the things that happen immediately and forget about the real things that need dealing with and providing solutions up front. The energy sector. Clearly, I've been reading various reports and it's hemorrhaging. That's the least I can put it. And if we are not careful, we'll get to a point where the debt in that sector will cripple this economy. So, looking forward, how do we avoid such a situation? Our sincere apologies to our guests who were billed to start and end the show from 9 to 12. So my guests in the studio are Harriet Emisarta, co-founder and executive partner, Arthur Energy Advisors. Thank you so very much for making the time to join us.
You're welcome.
Great. Also here in the studio is Dr. Nida Kwasante. He's energy consultant and former director, technical regulation at Energy Commission. Thank you so much, Doc.
Thank you.
Joining us via Zoom are Kwejo Poku, executive director, Institute for Energy Policies and Research, and Dr. Rivison Opong, energy economist and founder, chief editor, Global Energy Insights. Gentlemen, thank you for making the time. Okay, so please unmute your mics for now and be mindful of that once you are called upon to make your contribution. Unmute. Can we hear you?
Yes, we can hear you, if you can hear me.
Great. Okay, so for starters, and I'll start with Doc here. For starters, when we put up our flyer and brought to the attention of the country that the energy sector is estimated to pile up a debt of as much as, 12.5 billion US dollars. Some people were taken aback, very surprised. Some were really sad, and they sent us messages. Some believe that this is such that we can't get out of. How did we get there? How did we get here where we are likely to get there?
Well, we got here, and thank you very much, and thank you for having us. We got here simply by failing to take decisions that needed to be taken. And it's not one decision, but it's several. The most important one, of course, was separating the cost of electricity from the price that we pay. And that took the pressure off us improving the performance of the utilities. So inefficiencies were tolerated to an extent that they shouldn't have been. And also, we increased costs in areas where it was avoidable. We've heard a lot about excess capacity, that being the most common one. But there's also excess gas supply, which was projected. So all of these things work together to send us downhill into this position where we're staring at disaster. Without sort of breaking the steam, I should say that some actions have been taken. So 12.5 billion is no longer where we are heading. It's still bad, but it's not as bad as 12.5 billion. We are probably heading towards about 7.5 billion now. And we'll tell you more about some of the things which have been done so far, which have managed to bring that target or that looming disaster or mitigate it to some extent. But the fact is 7.5 billion is also terrible.
So as we understand, Madam Emisata, as we understand, by at the end of 2018, we are talking about a debt that was around 2.7 billion or so. So what makes us bring that estimate of 12.5 by 2023?
Samson, as you heard Doctor say, we continue to take the decisions that accrue the debt to the sector. I mean, by 2018, you are 2.7 billion. Some of the contracts, the take-or-pay contracts that were signed for power production, were not yet due. So over the years, you've had some of those become due. In the meantime, we've also entered into some agreements to bring in gas and to increase the excess gas that we have. So in other words, what I'm saying is that in 2018, not only were we on track to have excess in power generation capacity, we already had excess gas. And then we went ahead to put in place arrangements to procure more gas. So now you have the debts that are accruing from the excess capacity we procured, and now you also have debts that are accruing from the excess gas we've procured, and those that we have in the pipeline will also mature and we have to add them to the debt. So I think that it's very clear, and I think Doc has already said this, that the way in which we're making decisions are not helping us. And I think one of the things that we need to note is that in the energy sector, the size of the projects are such that you only need a few to really get yourself into trouble. And also, when we make these decisions, the energy sector projects are long-term projects. You're talking minimum 20 years, 25 years terms. And therefore, when you make a decision that does not augur well, you have to stay with it for a very long time. So that's why you're seeing some of the decisions, one, the magnitude very quickly increase. But also, if we don't take the necessary steps today, these are situations that will stay with us for a very long time and maybe get worse.
Dr. Opong, we are told that Ghana is one of the countries where, we pay a lot, as in the rate, the tariffs are high. So why are we talking about not being able to finance the sector properly?
Thank you. Thank you to committee for bringing me here. Yes, we do understand that Ghana has one of the highest tariff, even in Sub-Saharan Africa. Lower than others, like Liberia and Co. Our even neighbor Cote d'Ivoire. But financing by ourselves, I believe, is totally different from getting a higher tariff. And I believe Dr. Santi touched on all of the keys. The reason why we have high tariffs is because of the added capacity that we are paying for but not tapping into, right? And also the tariff that we set do not come to the government unless the government take the decision to invest by itself to set up plants, those IPPs, to generate power, and then we can testify. We can see that. We all believe that the discovery of gas was the solution And I think we have had the discussion on different platforms. But what do we see? The cost of gas, what we call the weighted average cost of gas, as a fuel for producing power or electricity is that high that we cannot reduce the tariff for electricity. And even going forward, to be very honest with you, and we are going to probably see a much more higher WACOG if care is not taken. So a higher tariff is supposed to come. But just like I said in the beginning, certain higher tariff and in investing in a project are two different things altogether.
Kojo, we are told that the IMF tells us that and this year, they tell us that the government of Ghana paid over 2% of GDP. That's a lot, 2% of GDP, about $1.37 billion in 2020 to support the sector. And it goes on to project that the sector shortfall under business as usual assumptions will remain over 1 billion per year until at least 2024.
Yeah.
This is not sustainable.
Yes, Samson, good morning to you and my guests and your viewers. I have always said that it's unfortunate that this government or past government don't take the energy sector very serious. The energy sector is the single most important sector in Ghana today. You just mentioned the analysis in terms of what the contribution is to GDP. You've mentioned what the debt can grow into if care is not taken. And if we get to that 12 billion, even the 7 billion that Prof talks about, is still substantial. That is more than what we need to finance the shortfall of this year's budget. Okay? Now, I think there's something I need to clarify. We keep contributing the energy sector debt to overcapacity. Overcapacity is something that we are actually coming out of it. In 2017, 2018, you can talk about overcapacity and get away with it. As we sit now, going into 2022, we no longer have the luxury to talk about overcapacity. As we speak, we were at 2,800 megawatts in 2019. We are about 3,200 today. Now, the total capacity, installed capacity, is about 4,000 megawatts and change. Now, in that space, you need what is called a spinning reserve, which is about 20% of your installed capacity. So if you do 20% of your 4,000 that you have, is 800 megawatts. So in 2022, we are really borderline of our capacity and the rest is spinning reserves. Now, what we need to do as a nation is to figure out how do we pay for this spinning reserve. As we speak, PULC does not factor that into our prices. Now, in the energy sector recovery program, which talks about the 2023 12 billion, one of the things that the government admitted was that we need to increase electricity tariffs plus other measures to be able to bring the sector to balance. This year was a year that we're supposed to do a major electricity recovery pricing. Okay, there's a major review in our pricing this year. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. So it means that we are still behind on the policies that we need to make. We keep blaming past actions of people, talk about excess capacity and all those things. Yes, it was the cost for the debt in the past, okay? But when you started your narration, you said we are hemorrhaging. And in hemorrhaging, you need to stop the bleeding. And we've not done that, okay? One of the biggest relief that we brought into the sector was ESLA. And going forward, I'm sure when I have a next bite at this discussion, I will explain how the ESLA has come in to compound the issue instead of relieve the sector.
Right, Doc. So he says that we have not been able to stop the bleeding. You were positive somewhat when you said we have done quite a bit, but you mentioned what caused these issues: excess power generation capacity, excess gas supply, non-payment of bills, technical losses, and the rest of them. We understand that the way forward is to step up our game in implementing the energy sector recovery program. Mm-hmm. What is that, and how exactly is it a sort of a solution?
Okay, thank you very much. I think the energy sector recovery program is not one thing, it's many things. Essentially, it's a long list of actions which are designed to fix this problem. Now, before even it was approved in 2019, there was a recognition that we had a problem. We've talked about energy sector debts for ages, but one government will pay the debt of the previous one and then proceed to build its own debt for the next government to come and pay it down. And as with debts, it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So a team was put together to analyze the causes and to diagnose some solutions or interventions to bring it down. And so there was this comprehensive program put together and approved by Cabinet in May 2019. Now, 2 years down the line, a number of these initiatives have been implemented. But first of all, let me just itemize 6 key issues. We've talked about them. One is the excess generation capacity. By definition, with time, that excess will go. So even if you do nothing, with time, as our demand grows, that excess will go away. And I think Kojo has made some reference to that. Nonetheless, it is expensive because you are paying for something that you are not using. And under take or pay contracts, the assumption is that you ask somebody to build your power plant to supply you power. He is not responsible for finding out if you need the power or not. If you didn't need it, you shouldn't have gone to him. Once he has built his power plant, he has borrowed money, he has invested, he needs to get paid. And that is why they are take or pay. So take or pay is not the problem. The problem is building a plant you don't need or contracting somebody to build a plant you don't need. If you need the power, take or pay is not a problem. As you use it, you pay. Same thing with excess gas. If you go and contract somebody to supply you with gas, but you don't need the gas, he also goes to contract somebody else to supply him with that gas. That person wants to be paid. If you don't pay him, he can't pay them. So he'll insist that whether you take my gas or not, pay for it. That's the way these markets work. Then we have our utilities being inefficient. We know they lose a lot of the power that they purchase. So we contract these plants to give us power, and we lose 40% of it before we can sell it. Who's going to pay for that? Then we also have inefficient procurement. We hear stories about meters being procured and ending up in a warehouse getting burnt, and all sorts of other contracts. And then we also have the staffing sometimes gets bloated, but possibly that is not as high an issue. Then we have poor debt collection. You sell the power, but you don't collect your money. You issue a bill, the people don't pay, and life goes on. So whether it's government, and the utilities make a big deal about how much government owes them, but you probably find that the private sector owes them even more. When I say private sector, you and me, as well as business. Then I talked about power plants. Now, you can procure a power plant and pay a good price or pay an excessive price. We have tended to pay more than average for the power that we procure. And the primary cause of this has been that we go and sit in a room, you and me, and decide, Charlie, your power, how much will you sell it? And because especially we have done this when we were hot, we were doomso, you know how desperate I am. In that situation, you're not going to bargain. Because I want it now. So you up your price, and I'll agree. We've negotiated from a position of disadvantage, and we've done so one-on-one, in dark corners, and everything is secret. So lastly, the tariff issue. Once we decouple cost and tariff, you can do a lot of nonsense, and the people or the population doesn't feel it immediately. So they don't complain about the nonsense that we are doing. So currently, the excess capacity charge, we're not paying for it. It's not captured in our tariff. PRC has done a tariff which does not include us paying for any of the excess capacity. That cost is transferred directly to Ministry of Finance. Where they find the money from in our minds, is their problem. We forget that they'll turn around and bring things like e-levy to collect that money from us. And I keep saying, even if we don't pay it on our bills, we know we'll pay it one way or another. Our president, our ministers are not going to take money out of their pockets to pay what we don't pay. So whether our bills stay low or they go up high, we are paying for it. It's just that you don't see where government comes and takes money out of your pocket to pay for the electricity you should have paid on your bill. So that is the sum total. Now, looking at these problems, you can see that the solutions are in themselves contained in the description of the problem.
There's one thing that you mentioned that I'm struggling to appreciate when you said the private sector, not rather the public sector, is more indebted or is more liable to causing the debt?
We are equally liable. It's just that, in a sense, when you look at it...
When you mentioned and you said me, for example, you, and I can't understand that. If I don't buy my power and pay for it, I sleep in darkness. If I don't pay for my bills, my office will be non-functional unless I use the generating set.
Or unless you are, should I say, not as ethical and are willing to listen to somebody who tell you that he can help you. And he'll manage to bypass your meter so that now your air conditioners are not on are not going through the meter. So your air conditioners now can reduce the temperature to 16 degrees because it will have no impact on your bill. And we know that this goes on.
That's true.
We know industries sometimes have a whole furnace which is not on the meter.
In fact, somebody made that suggestion to me once. The only thing I didn't do was get him arrested.
But this is going on all over the country. And to the point that some people even feel it's a right to consume electricity and not pay for it. Recently in Tamale, we heard of an altercation between NEDCO staff and the public in that area.
That's right.
And it was all over payment of fees. NEDCO had the effrontery to want to install split meters, which would mean that bypassing the meter would become extremely difficult. And that caused the riot because they were trying to insist that people should pay for the electricity they were consuming. And that seems...
What's the percentage of that to the debt that we are dealing with?
So it's hard to quantify, but we say, for instance, in NEDCO, and maybe Harriet may have some updated figures, there are somewhere around 40% losses. Some districts, I think, as high as 60%. The point is that, yes, there's collusion from the...
If you are superintending over such loss, you don't deserve to be in that office, heading the institution.
Well, so that's another side of the solution, as you can say. When we appoint a leader to handle it, that should be one of the metrics for him keeping his job. But you and I know that the leaders of all these entities have different, should I say, performance metrics, which are not focused on losses, for instance, which are key. One of the things we implemented was a cash waterfall for ECG to see how much money they are collecting and to distribute that to all the people.
I can see you are getting into the solutions. I want you to hold on there. I want to pick the views of your friends on these, losses and causes of these problems, particularly in a way that all of us can begin to appreciate what role that we may be playing as individuals in the losses that is bringing us the accumulated debt that is unsustainable and may get to a point where it will, as it were, collapse the sector or affect the economy. So, Madam Misarata, I'm looking at it this way. So, we are talking about the energy sector recovery program, and as we understand, this is the entity that was reconstituted in 2021 with the vice president as the head of it. And the understanding is that the projected accumulated sector arrears is US 12.6 billion. The impact of the implementation has led to a reduction of 5.1 billion. so that, as he suggested earlier, net arrears we can talk about will be 7.5 billion. But how do we ensure that we don't talk about the $1 billion a year? Because that's clearly not something that we should continue in.
Samson, at the time this document was prepared, it was projected that by 2023, the annual sector debt will be increasing at a rate of about $2.7 billion. Now, I agree with Kojo when he talks about the capacity. We are almost matching the demand to excess capacity.
Okay.
But no sector, no energy sector procures power it needs 4 years, 5 years ahead of time and accrues the debt till it can use the capacity.
That's where we are.
That's what we've done with some of the capacity we procured. Because we procured it at a time we didn't need it, and hopefully in 22, 23, we will need that capacity. In the meantime, we have signed contracts for which we were paying 3 years, 4 years ahead of time. So, given the magnitude...
I can't wrap my mind around that.
Yeah. And Samson, I just want to, if you take, let me just take the numbers.
Unless you are running a public entity.
Yeah, but
and,
even
and it's
if,
crazy.
But Samson,
you won't contemplate that in a private, arrangement.
No, but Samson, even if you're running a public entity, Doc was talking about the fact that we're not factoring it into the tariff yet. But what it means is that the cost of doing business in the energy sector in the country goes up. Because the other person who's standing outside wanting to come in is going to make sure that extra provisions and securities are provided before they invest in the sector. That's a cost to the sector as well as the country.
Okay.
So we're not just talking about the cash or the debt amount, but the repercussions on all of us and the sector as well to go forward. Especially in the sector where we continue to complain that the tariffs do not meet the cost of delivering the service. And yet, our decisions make it sad that the cost of providing the service in our country becomes so high that the consumer is unable to pay. Because remember, the consumer also has a ceiling to how much they can spend on energy.
That's
because there are other things they need to procure on.
Yeah.
And if you don't make sure the decisions are efficient so that your citizens will have some extra buying capacity, then the economy doesn't grow.
Because and
they are
like
not
we
able
say
to
about
spend.
fuel, this affects everything.
That's right. Then they are not able to spend. So I think that given that if we were still looking at the 2.7 billion in 2023, given that maybe about 2 billion of it would have resulted from excess capacity, power capacity, and gas capacity, we still need to look at those things very, very critically. And I agree with Doug that there's excessive losses through theft and technical losses. But if you compare how much we lose, and I'm not saying we should continue to steal electricity, but if you compare how much we lose from through theft to how much one decision to procure capacity we do not need costs us as a country. If we were to rectify and take the right decisions, it will then take away, if you like, the 2 billion. We'll be left with the 7 billion. We tackle some theft. We look at a few other issues, and it should put us in a good place, a better place to move forward.
Let me have Kojo Poku and Dr. Riverson-Opong share your views on your perspective or your image that you know about these, causative problems. Yes, starting with you, Kojo Poku, what's the range of these issues that brings us the debt? Because I want us to get everybody's view before we launch into the solution. And I need to understand my role. What role am I playing in this process?
Okay, so let me put a bit of information out there. Prof mentioned that NEDCO was doing something like 40% in the losses. For ECG, in last year's report, it was 26.63. So it's 10% technical losses and 16.63 for commercial losses. So the technical losses is basically dissipation of energy due to old machinery and just loss on the cables. Then the 16.63 is the non-collection or the illegal connection, which is something that it can be rectified if everybody is to do their work. Now, in terms of how the sector gets more debt year on year, is to do with a couple of things. One, the FX translation. Most of these debts are in dollars. So year on year, it's not that the debt is accumulated, but because the cedi to the dollar depreciates, the debt itself gets bigger when you now translating it from the dollar equivalent to the cedi equivalent. Then you have interest on these debts, okay? So the FX translation is a very big factor on the indebtedness. Then the interest on the debt. Yes, there are a lot of SOEs that are very inefficient, don't pay bills. There's this rhyme that goes on, Gridco, ECG owes Gridco, VRA owes this person, Ghana Gas, although everybody owes somebody in the sector. So it's more or less like an intersectorial debt that goes like a merry-go-round. That is also a big factor. And that stems from the MDA, the Ministry, Department, and agencies not paying their indebtedness. So one of the biggest consumer of electricity is government, okay? Now, you realize that when under PDS was to happen, government went to parliament and ring-fenced certain sectors or certain ministries that were not to be part of prepaid meters. And they called those areas the security installations. And that included the education, health, and finance interior. So in interior, it includes all the barracks, the police, military, and the education. It includes the schools, health, it includes all the hospitals. Now, all these institutions don't pay their electricity bill, okay? So government becomes the biggest indebtor. So if me and you pay our debt, or we have prepaid meters, government, who is the biggest indebtor to the sector, does not allow prepaid meters to some of these areas. So the debt keeps occurring. Then the second leg of that was that we now brought in ESLA. What did ESLA do? We took in the ESLA money, which is the levy that was imposed. Then we went to the bond market and took a bond. Now, we took a bond not for the entire debt in the sector. We took a bond for a partial debt. Now, whilst we are trying to find money to now pay the interest on the coupons, the debt's still reoccurring. So you now brought in a solution that doesn't solve the problem. So, look, it's a problem where government needs to sit up because he's the number one problem or number one causer of the problem. So if government wants to resolve this problem, like we have heard from His Excellency John Mahama from when he was president to today, we should put prepaid meters on all ministry, departments, and agencies, barracks, schools, hospitals, because these are money-making institutions. Why can't they pay their bills? So that is where the problem is.
Yeah. All right. Dr. Rev Senopong, if you have a few insights to share on, these problems that lead to the losses, let's hear them. And then we will take a quick break, return to ask questions about how to address the excess capacity matters. What will be, how effectively can we ensure implementation of what Doc had referred to, the catch waterfall mechanism, among others? Yes. Thank you so much once again. So I think Kojo kind of stole some words from me, and that's had to do with once talk about energy sector debt, to the lay person, he's saying that the energy ministry has made certain laws. That's right. But that's exactly what Kojo said. It's in the energy value chain, so where you see ECG's inability to pay VRA, for VRA's inability to pay for the gas consumed to Ghana Gas and GMPC, brings all those debts. So GMPC can also not pay for OCTP gas. Okay, so we realize that it just runs to the value chain from the time that we have seen that we saw the 12.5 starting from I would say 2.748 as of 2018, which we call the legacy debt, right? So adding on, even till date,
We still have some kind of minute legacy debts that we do acquire, even though we still have the CWM, as Dr. Asante said, implemented. Why do we have that? Because again, like Dr. Asante said, the inability for electricity to ECG to collect all revenue, so we have that losses from there. And at the moment, even with the CWM, you realize that the CWM cannot make full payment to the entire value chain, month on month. The reason, first of all, is the electricity debt that is, you've all discussed. I'm not going to touch on that. And then also the revenue collection. Also, one big point is also the weighted average cost of gas that is not compatible. So month on month, once you have discrepancies in the volumes of gas that is being used, you have the weighted average cost of gas a bit higher than what is set by PURC. Once that goes into the CWM model, you're going to have your revenue much lesser than what expected. We have for now only ECG collection on the CWM. What about NETCO? And I believe probably once you go on, Dr. Santo will touch on that. We do expect that moving forward, we do have the NETCO also revenue coming onto the stream to reduce certain costs, because we also know that the NETCO takes care of the distribution from the BA to the north, and we also have a company taking care of the free zone area. If all these collections could come, I believe that the sector debt from 2019 to 2023 could be, realized. You realize that Dr. Santi is saying that it's reducing from 12.2 to 5 by 5-point-something million dollars. And one of the key things that he mentioned was got the implementation of that. At least there is some money to share in the sector. And also with the MOF sector stabilization payment to reduce the accumulated legacy debt, I think about 6.6 billion was paid in 2020, an approximation of 1.2 billion, including the 2019 MDA payment. So Minister of Finance is doing his best to pay this MDA payment, but just like Kokojo said, sorry, if we allow them to pay for the energy loss, so the energy used by themselves, I believe the revenue collection by ECG will also go high. Another thing that we have also not mentioned is also the loss of ECG's high paid customers, i.e. the mining companies. So there's competition now. You see Genser coming into the play, competing with ECG over the mining companies. And I've sat in meetings where ECG complained bitterly that has halved, that's reduced their revenue, I don't say by half, but to a marginable range. So if we don't take care and these private IPPs take over ECG's customers, we should expect even the cash waterfall mechanism not functioning. Interesting.
I want to take a break, but I saw you shaking your head. That must mean that you want to say something. Can you make that quick about the last point he made that you don't seem to agree?
Well, I'm just saying that if you listen to the discussion we're having, I think we're complicating, some of the terms and the funds and the different funds we set up, make it sound as if the energy sector, unlike other businesses, is so special and different and very complicated. Like every business, it's cost and selling price. And when you live in a competitive market, you have to be competitive.
That's right.
If ECG is competitive and it's had its customers for a long time, and the relationships are good, you shouldn't be afraid of the competitor, because that's what all businesses do.
Right.
But because ECG is public, if it's not competitive, eventually they will lose their customers. So that is not the reason why the cash waterfall mechanism will not work. And we have to also remember, just because we name a special fund by a special name doesn't make it become a solution.
Okay.
The cash waterfall only receives what we collect. So if we have shortfall in collection, the cash waterfall will also have a shortfall in revenue collection, and everybody just gets a little of what is collected. Okay. So the emphasis has to be in, if we're not collecting enough, we have to collect them.
Okay.
And the institutions that collect them must have the means they must have the freedom, they must have the know-how to go and collect the money so that the money is there to pay for the cost of delivering the service. So I think that I would like to see how we move forward with this. But electricity is electricity delivery service. It's a business like everything else. And whether we are operating it in the public or the private, we have to make sure that the business principles work. Otherwise, any name you give it, it still doesn't work.
We take a quick break. When we return, we are going to be big on the solutions. And like I keep saying, I like to hear what my role as an individual will be in this, so that whilst I'm holding someone responsible and accountable, I also must do my part. And my guest, Harriet Mr. Arthur, is co-founder and executive partner, Arthur Energy Advisors. Kwejo Poku, Executive Director, Institute for Energy Policies and Research. Dr. Riverson Opong is energy economist and founder, as well as Chief Editor, Global Energy Insights. And Dr. Ni Dakwasante is Energy Consultant and former Director, Technical Regulation at Energy Commission. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. And my guest, Harriet Mr. Arthur, is co-founder and executive partner, Arthur Energy Advisors. Kwejo Poku is executive director, Institute for Energy Policies and Research. Dr. Riverson Opong is energy economist and founder, chief editor, Global Energy Insight. Dr. Ni Dakwasante is energy consultant and former director, technical regulation at the Energy Commission. This program, as always, is paid for by Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go, Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. We lead, home is where one starts. Having mosquitoes, coil and spray, pleasant on humans, tough nightmare on insects, and Napa Foods. It's tasty. DBS Industries. We truly are your root experts. Robert & Sons Limited, Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care services provider. Rehoboth Properties, quality housing for all. Fabrimental, your partner in steel. Trazaku Fast Floors, stronger, faster, and affordable. And Cap Farm Legends Nights. Now, let's get to see how it looks like. We will be able to get out of this difficulty. How do we do that? And I return to you because you have started already to throw out the solutions. What I don't understand is this thing about a problem with collection. Well, why is that a problem? And why should that be a problem?
Clearly, you haven't done business in Ghana. Collecting money is difficult. Whether you are selling cloth or you are selling business services, you will get people to ask you to do it for you. But when it comes to paying for the goods you've supplied or for the service you provided, I'm sure Harriet has had problems with that in her business. Ghanaians don't like paying. Nobody likes paying money. It's just the problem that when it comes to a publicly owned service, we feel a right not to pay because, after all, it's for all of us. And we are all Ghanaians, as we often say. So there's an extra difficulty for ECG and for NEDCO to collect their money from the general public and even from government institutions.
I thought other things are in a different basket compared to, energy, where, I'm the one who is selling literally holds so much power, so
only when he has the power to turn off the tap.
Exactly.
But you see, the utilities will tell you you cut certain entities or institutions and you get calls. You get calls from the power that be, or from your own boss, hey, connect these people again. They haven't paid a penny, but reconnect them. And the utilities constantly make that complaint. And very often there's the implication that the jobs of those people are on the line. So just connect them and let's go on. So that's the reality. There's no doubt that that excuse is used and abused for the utilities to also have their own private customers who they provide a service that they do not own for their own personal gain. But if the powers that be did not condone some of this, the utilities would have, or their employees would have no excuse to do that. So on that issue of collections, you often hear about prepayment meters. It's a technology solution to cover our cultural, maybe, dispensation not to pay. I'll tell you for a fact that a lot of countries do not believe in prepayment meters. And the reason is simply that when you install a prepayment meter, it means your meter readers stop going to that facility. When they stop going to that facility, if I've bypassed the meter, even in plain sight, there's nobody there coming to see. If a meter reader comes there and maybe he finishes his rounds maybe around 5 p.m. and he knows that he has disconnected this house and he sees the lights on, it tells him that basically they have bypassed the meter or something. But if he's never there, you don't see it. So developing countries like us, some of them choose not to have prepayment meters, but they enforce collection and disconnection. I mean, countries are different. We may go the prepayment route, but it's an expensive solution.
Very.
Prepayment meters are expensive. So we must accept that our cost will therefore be higher than a country which has a philosophy of paying its bills. And we can't sit here and complain, hey, our power is too expensive. Now, who caused that? If we pay our bills, we can get slightly cheaper power. They won't have, the utilities won't have as high interest costs whilst they await payment. They won't have to import expensive prepayment meters. Their power suppliers will not request long periods of letters of credit for power supply, which have a cost on them. When we have a poor payment culture, and that is you and I, it makes life more expensive for us. We know that also with bank interest rates, but that's another thing altogether. We are part of the problem. So we must own the solution. Basically accepting that until we change our attitudes, we will pay slightly more. The other thing is that nobody likes unpleasantness. Collecting money takes a certain character. I mean, you have to have a tough face to go and stand in front of people when they're, hey, you know, my child was ill and my husband lost his job. We can make excuses. And you have to be the tough nut who, I don't care, you pay me my bill. You know. So NEDCO people, ECG people, they're also human beings. They don't like the unpleasantness of going to disconnect people and argue with people over bills. So if there's something else they can do rather than go and do disconnection or going to tell people you haven't paid your bill, they'll do that. And if we let them get away with it, they will not enforce collection and payment of bills. It's an unpleasant...
Looking at what should be low-hanging fruit, so to speak, and within this period and the energy sector, the awards thing that was held recently, I've discovered that within the sector, the late Professor Beku Bruhammond is being celebrated for, you know, his impacts and particularly in this area. So when I look at the energy sector recovery program and I see that the Vice President is first and top on it, and I look at the efforts that have been made to seek to reduce the debts, then I ask myself, he's the man who is leading the digitization, the digitalization agenda to create a smart economy. I'm sure we're all excited about that. If for nothing at all, we can give credit for that. Now, why are we not using the simple digital methods to avoid this? We can't collect, and some people are talking about losses, you know, up to 40 to 60%.
So we are, but like I said, that solution has a cost attached to it. And I should just give credit to the senior minister who was the original chairman of the ESR,
yes,
the Energy Sector Task Force, and has been replaced by the vice president, who is now chairing the task force. So all of the initiatives have been considered. Like I said, in Ghana, the digital solution of prepayment meters is our, I should say, weapon of choice, of first choice. So ECG, NEDCO are rolling out prepayment meters for the public sector, for the ministries, departments, and agencies, to take away the choice of payment. If you don't pay, you are disconnected by the system itself.
Should be as simple as that.
It is as simple as that, except that, like I said, the meters cost money. So we have to find money again to buy these meters, to have them installed at all these places. And yes, that is being done. I have some challenges with the speed and the targeting of it, but it's being done. The other thing to say is that, in fact, you mentioned Abekubu Hammond. He was the chairman of the Energy Commission when I joined the Energy Commission. And one of the things you have from people like him is the enthusiasm and the determination. In fact, when I was appointed, he called me. I hadn't really ever spoken to him, but he called me up, got my phone number, as if we're old friends. And he was saying, you know, we are looking forward for you to come and make some impact in the energy sector. So he gave sort of that charge or that impetus that sort of carried me through. And I think with the energy sector recovery program, it is an initiative with potential in the sense that the government itself has recognized the problem, has diagnosed the issues and come up with solutions. The challenge is that if it was easy to do, it would have been done long ago. So we all recognize that some of these decisions are difficult to implement and painful in their impact. So with the vice president there, he's able to talk at a high level with the energy minister and the finance minister because they have impact on our budget, on our finances. And that is why we have made the impact so far, about 5 billion being taken off the top.
Okay.
But those were sort of the easy ones. The tough ones are the ones that will affect you and me, including tariff, including getting ECG and NEDCO to improve their collection rate, their efficiency, including making sure that we don't enter into expensive contracts or excessive procurement. And if you understand how these things happen, they don't happen generally by accident. They are normally people who would promote these things for one reason or another. So it's not as easy as just turning off that. And very often, you know, it's done with a positive intention. You know, we project a growth of the economy such that we will need this power. There was a 5,000 megawatt target that we had as a country. That 5,000 megawatt, as Harriet describes, was procured before we were ready to use it. So we can be ambitious in our projections, but when it comes to purchasing power, we have to be realistic. And that tension is sometimes problematic with a government that is very ambitious to develop the country.
Okay. Now, let's see. And I suppose we can start writing a book. Right, don't mind me. So you've written profusely, and I want us to benefit from what you have in those notes as regards the solutions. Is it the excess power generation capacity issue you want us to deal with? Which are the issues you want to take, and what are the solutions?
Samson, I think that underlining all the things we're talking about is a chronic inefficient decision making. And I think it's gotten us the excess power capacity, it's gotten us the excess gas capacity, it continues to plague us in other areas. I think that if in our sector we're waiting for people to change before they pay for services delivered to them, we're going to wait a long time. how do the MTNs and the Vodafones get their services paid for? And so energy sector, I keep saying that we have to begin to think about it as a business. Whether the owners, the major owners are government or not, it is a business and things have
because we do not have an option. We cannot get to where, we cannot continue on this trajectory.
No, we can't.
And we cannot get to where it is estimated we'll get to.
We can, but we will be committing suicide. We can.
That's right.
Okay, so, and I think Ni has touched on the fact that the Vice President leads the action on the energy sector recovery program shows that government may be serious this time. But the point is that I'm hoping that his time spent on something like this is short and not too long. Because as a country, we have things to do, and our Vice President need not be the money collector or finding money to feed. That's why you have heads of institutions, that's why you have a minister for energy. You have all kinds of, you have technocrats in there who can do their job. So he can look at the country 20 years from today. So I think that is a great idea, but if all we do is use our president, our vice president, or cabinet ministers to collect money for one sector, that's a problem. That it tells you that the business...
But a particular sector whose debt has such an effect on the economy that it can cripple it, and the vice president is head of the economic management team, I suppose that's the reason. But my question is, he's the one, laying out all the, fast economy, strategies, digitization and digitalization. Why are these not tools that we can see evident in this area in a way that can help?
Simon, when you get yourself cash-strapped, your options become very limited. And so some of the things you're saying, like Neil was saying, if really we want to go the prepayment route, the money they're talking about for prepayment is only, if you compare it to our debt, it's only about 400 million to give everybody. We're done. But we're doing 10 million, 5 million, another 20 million, because we don't have the money. And yet, we're taking decisions that can cost us 1 billion at a time, annually. And so imagine that we reduce that liability resulting from our decision making. We can take 400 of that and implement the solution of prepaid meters once, and then we're done. So, and then it becomes the incremental meters that we put in here and there. So I think that's what you see. I think that when all is said and done, if we don't stop this chronic, inefficient decision making, if we give ourselves 5 years, we'll be back here talking the same thing. So I will say that one of the things, like Ni has already mentioned, but I just want to emphasize it. I think one of the things that we need to look at is look at the entire value chain and how things get done. And I think also for the decision making to be comprehensive. How do you buy something and not watch what price you're selling it, or the effect and what it is that you're doing? Because when we talk about things like the FX increases the debt, the interest and everything, every business, when they loan money, look at how much the interest rate is. They factor it into their projections for revenue. That's right. So they can feature it. So again, either the decision making is not complete, it's inefficient in its chronic nature. Consistently, the decisions we make land us in trouble. And so you step into 1 billion, then you redeem 200, then you step in 2 billion, and you redeem 300. It doesn't make you make the progress. So my suggestion would be that now that we're looking at solving some of these problems, not just to look at the items we deal with now, but some of the decisions we're already in the throes of making today, as we are paying off what we've already incurred, so that we're not adding to it. Because as we're talking about excess generation, we're still procuring generation. So how do we put a stop? Let's put some timeline somewhere and say, okay, we've incurred enough, we've added and so forth. Can we put a line here so we're not procuring anymore, so that we can halt the decay and then we can come back?
There are the issues of the delayed application of the automatic adjustment formula, delays in gas infrastructure completion to help. What can you say about that?
I think, again, I come back to the decision making. Why? So the idea to make sure that our fuel supplies are secure was what has led in bringing on board LNG infrastructure. And I think you can make a good case for bringing in LNG. But then we had envisaged that we should connect the West and the East so that gas from Ottawa can flow into Tema, and Tema can go to Atabo. That way you only needed one LNG, procurement. But here we are, the actual infrastructure as we've envisaged it now is a little below 200 million. But we're procuring facilities that will cost us will land us in a debt of about 500 million at a time when we don't need the excess gas, right? To put one LNG infrastructure in Tema and another in Takoradi. And then the connecting projects that connects the two places has been delayed. When the amount to do that is much less than doing these other projects. So again, I'm just pointing you back to the decision-making process and how we tie these things together to make sure that, and plus, if we were to actually look at the option of actually constructing an online pipeline from Atabo to onshore pipeline from Takoradi to Tema, then to Tema, then you could look at also industries along the line. You could immediately supply and maybe even create economic zones along the line as you're coming. Because we have the excess, industry needs to consume it. And so instead of putting it under the sea and then having to find ways to develop the demand for it, if we put it onshore, we immediately can then create some economic zones.
Right. I need to take a break, and then when I return, I'm bringing in Kojo and Riverson to get your thoughts on the tariff structure. Are we looking forward to a revision of the tariff structure and the cost allocation? We went into PDS. Does that suggest that that was the best approach, and it's likely the kind of approach that will bring us the needed, as it were, resolution and a future for the sector? So kindly hold on for me. Let's go for this very final break and return. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile, it's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And now, let me go quickly to my guest on Zoom and have you help us with the solutions quickly. Because look, we're talking industrialization. It takes energy. Without energy, we are lost in this. So start with you, Riverson.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'll be very... try to be brief here because I have a lot of points here.
Right.
I just want to start by saying that ESRP was not set to identify debt for Ministry of Finance to pay. I want to emphasize this based on the remarks I had from the honorable lady sitting in the panel. ESRP was set to identify ways and means to seize the debt. Okay, and that is what for the past few years ESRP has done. And so I want to buttress on the point that CWM therefore has to be sustainable. How can CWM be sustainable if collection is not coming? I mean, and collection is not the only point. And I'm happy she mentioned business strategy. Therefore, then we would task ECG to come up with a strategy not to lose their customers. Because as we all speak now, CWM stands on the revenue collected from ECG, and it's point blank. That is number one solution that we can use to seize. So I mean, there's a debt. Ministry of Finance has paid. It still has an impact on the revenue of the nation, on the budget. Let's find ways and means to seize this. And I'm happy you mentioned tariff. I believe going forward. And we also thank God that Dr. Asante is part of the board of PRC, and like he said, we would have a cost-reflective tariff, for that matter, where the difference in debt, the difference in tariff will not cause a debt in the energy sector. That's one.
Okay.
I'm also happy decision-making, firm decision-making was mentioned by all the two panels, and I'm sure Kojo also mentioned the same. But just to buttress on that, due to firm decision to stop Takoradi LNG, out of this 5.1 billion that we are saving from the 12 point something million, 68 million was saved in the energy sector. GMPC reducing thermal LNG volume and commitment, we're able to save 1.6 billion. You get it? So it's buttressing on the point that decision making is very critical. Some must be firm so that we can save the sector.
Yeah, Dr. Rachel Pong, thank you. Forgive me, but we just run out of time. Kojo Poku, what can you say? What can you say in some 30 seconds, 1 minute, in the contribution towards the bigger solutions? You are muted.
Sorry, the biggest problem is with Ministry of Finance that does misappropriation. Constantly, PIAC has come out to say that, look, my revenue coming in has not been put towards what it's to put towards to. Yes, decision making is very important. Looking at the structure, one of the basic things that we need to do is to transition ECG into PSP, which is private sector-led initiative where it can be run efficiently. In summation, I will say that if Ministry of Finance takes all the money given to them and put them to the right use, in some areas, Ghanaians will get a relief. Then we'll look at the areas where we need to make up for. But if you now put all the money into one basket and misappropriate it, then there will always be a problem. So that's the biggest challenge.
Thank you very much. Before we went to the break, you had your hand up. Some 30 seconds. Do I have 30 seconds? Yes.
So just quickly, I think we have expensive power. As part of the SIP, we are trying to negotiate down some of the power plants we already have. But the other key thing is that we should not bring any other power plants without a competitive procurement process, which in itself will ensure that the prices are low.
Thank you all so very much. My guests have been Dr. Ni Darko Asante. He is energy consultant and former director technical regulation at Energy Commission. Dr. Rivison Opong, energy economics and founder, chief editor, Global Energy Insight. Kojo Poku, Executive Director, Institute for Energy Policies and Research, and Harriet Mr. Arthur is co-founder and executive partner, Arthur Energy Advisors. I'm Samson Ladianyanini, and my outfit, as always, is by Habil's Couture. You can find them at Ajiringano Gates, East Legon, and call them 0200 84 1988. Have a good afternoon.